Hello, Gemini. This is a forecast for Gemini rising and Gemini moon sign for June of 2021. So, Gemini, your ruling planet, Mercury, is now stationed retrograde and starting to slowly move back to reassess and to review. And this is something you're very used to because it does it 3 times a year, sometimes even 4 times a year for 3 weeks at a time. So, it's always either moving in or out of retrograde. And it does. Um, take 3 weeks, but it also takes a couple of weeks either side of that, to go in and out of the retrograde. So for weeks at a time, really, you're going through this process of review. This is part and parcel of who you are, Gemini, of course. It's what makes you you. And so Gemini, of course, is all about thinking about this and that options. What would make me happy? I could do this, but then I could do that. That increases in intensity when Mercury, your ruling planet, goes retrograde. Oh, I could do this. Oh, I could do that. I did that, and that this happened. It's all of this process of review that's going on in June. And of course, Mercury also rules your fourth sign, which is all about what would make you happy. This very practically could also mean that there are changes going on in the sphere of life that impacts what makes you happy, especially your home environment, your more private life, um, as opposed to your more public life. Now, Mercury also is going to retrograde back from your sign by the 2nd of June into the 12th sign, Taurus. And I'll bring that forward. You can see that here. So by the 2nd of June, Mercury has moved back into Taurus and it will retrograde for most of the time in Taurus. This is, again, sidereal Taurus I'm referring to here, and will station on the 22nd of June. So that's when things can start to slowly move forward. You might have some insight before then, especially when the sun and moon, or Mercury and sun come together. But it won't really be until after the 22nd of June that you'll be able to move forward with a plan in place and sort of taking actions. So again, as I said, this is a very personal change for you and in terms of your home environment. And because Mercury is now moving retrograde through your 12th house, there could be some foreign link. There could be some link to foreign travel, 12th house, but there could also be a link to expenditure. And you might have to spend a lot of energy and maybe even money on your home, and on yourself personally as you're going through these very personal changes. So the 12th house is the house of losses on the one hand, and one of the ways we lose ourselves in many ways is through foreign travel, like long distance foreign travel, where it's almost like we don't seem like ourselves anymore. We're in such an alien environment, it's such a different environment. So that's one way we can experience the 12th house. But another way is through retreat. So 12th house is very much about retreating now when your Mercury is moving retrograde through the 12th. Having a retreat in June would be an ideal expression of this energy. Otherwise, it's likely to be a very confusing time in terms of, well, where am I going in life and what am I doing? The first and fourth house represent for you, Gemini, very much about your direction and what would make you happy. And being in the 12th of loss could show that you're having this sense of not being quite clear about what that might be. So just allowing for that in June, I think, would be very helpful in order for you to just sit back a bit, allow things to unfold as they will, and just have a retreat, even if it's just at home. Make a retreat at home. I think that would be an excellent use of this Mercury retrograde. Now, the fact that Mercury is also conjunct the North Node, Rahu, and there's an eclipse on the 10th of June in your 12th house, Taurus, this shows that there's also a lot of insights up for grabs in this whole process of review, a very personal review. So in order for you to access it fully, though, I think that unless you're on retreat, or at least having some retreat every day at home, then you might not grasp it fully, initially at any rate. 12th house is very much hidden from us, so it represents our subconscious, things that are hidden. It represents sleep. Maybe it's a need to kind of really look closely at your deep inner being and sense of stillness within, and that downtime that is absolutely needed at this time in June. So practically, if you're going through any changes at home, if you're making changes at home, just be mindful of that. They might not be quite clear until the end of June at least. And if you're traveling, if you're doing anything that involves kind of travel or any kind of negotiation or interaction or communications, they might not be very clear. You might not be very clear. You might be at a bit of a loss actually as to being able to express that clearly to someone else. They might not be able to express it clearly to you. It's not a conducive time to being very efficient and clear. It is a great time to be very, very creative though. 12th house Mercury, it's like putting Mercury in Pisces. Mercury in Pisces is a bit out of its depth, but it's like thinking outside the box kind of scenario. Now, that's accentuated all the more because Rahu, the North Node, is conjunct Mercury. And this creates this, along with the eclipse itself on the 10th, a real sort of surprising, perhaps, but sort of out of the box kind of way of thinking about things. Really surprising, really revolutionary for you. Oh, this is, oh, that's possible. You might not have seen that before. This could be possible now. Okay, let's do this. Let's try this. Now, again, be very mindful, of course, though, that it won't actually station to the 22nd of June. So you might have to be a bit more patient about how this is actually going to pan out, really. And until July, really, because Mercury will return to your sign Gemini in July and move forward beyond the point it started to retrograde at. So by July, certainly, you will be more clear about how to move forward. And in June, it's just not clear. When we add the fact that Mercury is actually very slow in its station, it's stationing at 0 degrees of Gemini, again, sidereal Gemini, it moves back to just 21 degrees of sidereal Taurus. That's only 9 degrees. That's pretty slow for Mercury retrograde. So it's going to feel even slower. And you might feel that the pace of life needs to really slow down for you personally. So that is the main focus for you, Gemini, in the month of June. But there are a lot of other things going on as well, which I'll mention now. Now, one of them is Venus, which is in your sign Gemini. And it means that it's exchanging with Mercury, this mutual exchange. Venus in Gemini, Mercury in Taurus. They're in each other's signs. But this exchange occurs between the 1st and the 12th. So again, it's this kind of give and take. And so there might be a sense of having to let go of something now. So a very personal thing as well that you have to let go of, a very personal way of being. And it could obviously pull in on the 4th house. Gemini is your 1st house, but of course Virgo is your 4th house and the other Mercury sign. And by pulling in on that again is about your home situation. So there could be something to negotiate here and to let go, really, more so. And so there's this kind of give and take here when planets exchange in this way, in this kind of relationship between Mercury and Venus. But other than that, Venus, your 12th lord, as well as your 5th lord, there are some enjoyments to be had here for sure. Venus is more enjoyable moving through your sign. The other complexity that's happening, and there are a few other complexities happening in June, of course, apart from the eclipse, is that Mars is moving into Cancer on the 2nd of June also. And Mars in Cancer is your speech, your values, your finances, your family, any dynamics that are going on there. And of course, Mars in Cancer can bring up some issues because Mars is very reactive in Cancer as opposed to being more proactive. So Cancer and Mars don't mix very well because emotions, become really intense and things might not pan out so clearly or easily. It's not as directed or proactive. Mars, and it might be frustrating. You might say things and you might feel like, I don't know where that came from, right? Kind of very reactionary, impulsive kind of speech, for example. But again, dealing with any kind of family members or around financial situations and things like that might be quite heightened in many ways and volatile. And when we add the fact that Saturn is opposing Mars, and this opposition comes into effect exact on the 1st of July. So the month of June is building into this kind of real sense of frustration and setbacks because Saturn is not only opposing Mars, but it's retrograde Saturn opposing Mars as well as Pluto. So there's this sense of a need to negotiate your values, your whatever is important to you, and other people's values and what's important to them. The 2nd and 8th sign is very much about finances, of course, very practically. But even beyond that, it's just about what is important to each party involved. So there might be a kind of like need to kind of look at that restraint that's coming in by the end of the month, and that you might not be able to clearly move forward in terms of the dynamics that are expressed here. Now, Mars is not your easiest planet, Gemini. It rules your sixth sign. It's very much about dealing with adversaries and basically your inner weaknesses. And you could project that outwardly very easily on other people and see them as an enemy. But really, it's your own issue that's been dealt with and brought up here and constrained and restrained for you to be able to take a good hard look at in terms of, what are you communicating? Is it true, or is it just a reaction, emotional reaction based on very immature expressions of Mars? Or, are you overcompensating and trying to bully something or someone in some situation here in the family dynamic or in your speech with anyone? Or do you feel bullied? Another thing that could easily happen. Do you feel like someone's kind of controlling you into sort of some situation here, especially around finances, for example, but any kind of family dynamic or any kind of this and that, me and them kind of situation here? Just be very mindful of that intensity and that explosive nature of Mars in Cancer. Again, restrained by Saturn by the end of the month, especially, and a lot of hidden dynamics to boot because of Pluto. So, a very complex period overall in having to negotiate any kind of financial dealings at all in June. And again, because Mercury's retrograde during all of this, even more so. So, just be very patient with anything that has to be negotiated, anything that's important to you. Thankfully, you have the Venus in your sign, of course, for most of the month, and the Sun will enter as well by mid-month. So there's this kind of energy and enjoyment as well that can be there and express, and the more energized you feel, the better you feel, the easier these kind of negotiations could be, we could say. So let me bring it forward. I want to show you the new moon. As you can see here, the moon is waning now into the sun, which happens on the 10th of June. And this happens at 24 degrees, or sorry, 25 degrees of Taurus. So this is at the latter part of Taurus in your 12th sign. And so this new moon on the 10th of June is a major reset in terms of, and because your ruling planet Mercury especially is very closely conjunct this new moon, as well as Rahu, this is a major reset around these negotiations and this need to have a deeper insight into what needs to be surrendered at this point. 12th house is all about letting go of something. You might have had some plan along the way at this point. You might have been planning ahead. For example, Mercury moves ahead of the sun and then it starts to slow down. It's stationed by the 29th of May and then starts to move back. It meets with the sun on this new moon, which is itself very significant around the 10th. So we have this new moon, Mercury conjoined the sun, and it's an eclipse, all in your 12th. So this very personal review around yourself and your home situation, there is something that you've been planning that now has to be completely reviewed, and if not completely let go of and reimagined, I would say. So it could be that you have something around your home situation that you have to just be open to, some change that you weren't anticipating. That could be a good thing as well. It could be a positive change, but either way, there's some change happening here. And again, something that needs to be negotiated and let go of, and then a reset at this point on the 10th of June to kind of reset your thinking around this. Now, it isn't the time to actually make the decision about it, even with Mercury conjunct the sun, because it's a new moon, of course, as well at the exact same time. And because it's a total solar eclipse or an annular, almost a total solar eclipse, means that there's so much change going on here for you personally that really it's not the time to make the decision. It's a time to be still with the insights that are available. And by the time after this now moves on after the new moon and Mercury then moves backward, then keep reviewing and processing the insight that you've gained. And it won't be until the 22nd that Mercury then stations direct and you can start to move forward with the plan, a new plan. And it probably will have to be a new plan, some new plan. So this is the 10th. It's quite a good time to really be still, with the new moon anyway, every month. But again, it's a solar eclipse, so a reset point in the month on the 10th. And let's move it forward then after this solar eclipse. And I just want to mention one other thing actually before we move it forward, is that this itself, this new moon on the 10th of June, is very much about a, resolution, a culmination point really after the full moon and total lunar eclipse that occurred 2 weeks prior to this on May 26th. And that occurred in Scorpio, in the depths of Scorpio, and in your sixth sign, Gemini. So this is very much about, well, and as Mars was transiting your sign during that time, the sixth sign brings in all of that need to deal with any blocks and hindrances at this time. And, in terms of, any kind of long-term plan that you have right now, and the kind of the eclipse energy bringing up any kind of issue around getting that, whatever that is, this resolution now might be on the 10th of June, on the new moon, a resolution around maybe having to let that go. And it might not be letting it go completely. It might be just a need to let go of the particulars of that plan, and not get too fixated on the details, and allow for something else to come up, or allow for it to morph into something else at this time. And maybe that's the resolution that will occur around the 10th of June. So let's move it forward. The moon moves into your sign on the 11th and 12th, and then it joins Mars on the 14th, 15th. So Mars moon, this is a time to be very mindful in your speech and in dealing with any kind of, in any family dynamic situation going on here. There could be some complexities here, of course. The sun is about to move into your sign, and that will happen on the 15th of June, depending on where you are. Mercury is still retrograde, remember, so, and there's an exchange still going on with Venus and Mercury, and this 112 exchange is very much about having to forego something or let something go, and just surrender it. So that's one thing. But the sun now moving into your sign is a good time of year, as it is every time this year, from mid-June until mid-July, to reinvigorate yourself, to recharge yourself. Now, most people do that at this time of year through holidaying. And I think it would be a good time of the year in June to actually take holiday, if it weren't for the fact that there's so many complications going on with restrictions with Mars, Saturn opposition, and the Mercury retrograde. It's just a very complex time. But at the same time, it is a time to have some downtime. So if you can have a break, and if you can't do that abroad, if you can't travel long distance, then to have a break at home if possible, because it is this month of June is asking that of you. Now, the sun moving into your sign by mid-month is that recharge, and literally getting sun, of course, if that's possible for you where you are, it would be a good idea, like tuning into that energy and vitality and that recharging, literally like a charging point, and charging yourself up for the coming year. So that occurs from mid-June. I'm going to bring it forward then until the full moon. Of course, you have the sun in your sign, and therefore the moon will then wax and reach its fullest in the opposite sign, in Sagittarius, in the other. And that occurs on the 24th of June. It occurs at 9 degrees of Sagittarius. And there are a couple of other key shifts that have happened at this point now. So we have the solstice on the 21st. We have the solstice on the 20th. Jupiter will have stationed retrograde. And then the day after the solstice, on the 22nd, Mercury will have stationed direct. So there's a couple of key shifts that's going on here around the solstice, the midpoint of the year. Now, the solstice itself, that alone is a time to be still, because it is a transition in the year. So it's a need to reset. It's not changing signs, the sun, but it is changing direction. It does change tropical signs. Of course, the sun moves into tropical Cancer on the solstice. But in terms of the sidereal zodiac, it's in Gemini still, your sign. And now that it's a full moon and things are shifting around, with Mercury now moving forward and Jupiter moving back, and this full moon and this Mars-Saturn opposition also coming to exact, things are kind of coming into opposition and review in a major way, while other things can start to move forward as well. And those things are more the issues I mentioned earlier for you, Gemini, which is the home environment, the home situation. So by the 22nd of June, Mercury's stationed direct, so you can start to now plan ahead again. Now it's a slow, tentative, set things out very slowly, kind of moving forward. It won't be until July that you can actually move forward more clearly with the plan. The plan itself might not even become very clear for you until July. But as this is happening, there's a full moon. The full moon is in Jupiter's sign Sagittarius. Jupiter itself has stationed on the solstice, and that is in the ninth sign. So any kind of travel, for example, any plans around that might need to be renegotiated for the long term, because Jupiter retrograde in your ninth sign until September is a, you know, the possibility of you needing to review those plans is there. But another thing is that you could look back for opportunities, to travel. Ninth sign. The other thing about ninth sign is study. That's also a possibility. So Jupiter is very strong, but it's just not very clear cut. There's no clear cut sort of way forward here right now, and until it stations in October. So think about the long term picture and your hopes and dreams and wishes for the future and what you would like to do. These are big questions that are kind of going to be more in a sense in the background all of this time until October. You reviewing and questioning and reassessing all of these big plans. But at the same time, as I said, Mercury is starting to move forward. So maybe more with more immediate plans in terms of your home situation. Perhaps the changes that have occurred in June will instigate those changes in July, and that you'll be more clear about those in July, or um, an option will be given to you to how to move forward in that regard. So those are the key changes. And the full moon itself, as I said, it's in Jupiter's sign, in Sagittarius, and your seventh sign. So it's all about the other. And so balancing your needs with the other is a key consideration of this full moon on the 24th of June. And at the same time, when we think about, Mars balancing its energies with Saturn, Moon with the Sun, Venus now conjoined Mars as well, and that's in itself a need to kind of find space for both of these outlets. So it's Mars is very much about what I want, and I want it now, and Venus is about your ability to compromise, and again, connected to the 12th house for you. How do I let go of this, and how do I negotiate with this? And so there's a real kind of push-pull going on here by the end of June that is really important to be mindful of. And some things are like pushing forward in terms of more immediate plans, perhaps, but bigger plans, long-term issues, maybe more pulling back and reassessed. So for you, Gemini, it's important to kind of be really cognizant of these push-pulls going on, and within the larger context and framework of restrictions, for example. That you have your own needs in the immediate time frame, but at the same time you have to negotiate with the bigger picture. So let me just finish out the month until the 30th of June. You can see how this pans out for the rest of the month, and you can see here that the moon has reached Jupiter by the 30th of June, and so this is your ninth sign. And again, re-emphasizing that ninth sign would be an important consideration here. And again, ninth sign is about, thinking about, the things that would really inspire you, and travel being one of those, but study could also be another option here. And although if we just cast it forward into the future a bit more and see the long term and the bigger picture here being Jupiter moving back into Capricorn conjunct Saturn and Pluto, which are retrograde in Capricorn, there's still some by autumn, mid-September until the end of November, there's still some things to negotiate here, and unexpected changes that are still having to be negotiated. But it does show that whatever you're negotiating will likely end up giving you an opportunity to get some help from somewhere else. There's something with the eighth sign, Jupiter's now stationing, and it's actually foretelling of this return to the eighth sign in your chart, which is basically a foretelling of this now possibility, an opportunity to gain something from someone else. Now, eighth sign is very much about unexpected change as well. So it's like getting an unexpected windfall, or getting an inheritance that you weren't expecting, or perhaps that you were expecting because Jupiter has already moved through here. But either way, there's a possibility here, and it starts in June actually, of this kind of retreat back of Jupiter. But it's a slow process that will take a few months now. So With that in mind, just think about June as a kind of more immediate time frame, as a complex month, and a time to be really sort of still and negotiate with these shifting tides. It's like shifting tides, like the undercurrents are going one way and the waves are going another. There's a lot of shifts and going on, a lot of changes going on in June to be cognizant of. So, Gemini, I hope that's been of help. And as always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time.